Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known with your host, Dr. James Yogati Weldon. Good day, this is Dr. Jim Weldon speaking from Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina. Our community, which is dedicated to bridging the gaps in our understanding between the different spiritual traditions of the world. Now, I had an interest in spirituality and Christianity from my childhood. By the time I was 13 years old, I had a small church that I founded in my hometown, Cocoa Beach, Florida. This is an ongoing series on my surprising true spiritual adventure story about the greatest story ever told, the life story of Jesus. And what we have recorded in the Bible is just a couple of years of his life and really doesn't explain either what happened in his youth. He disappeared from that part of the world around the age of 12 or 13 and reemerged in his early 30s back in the land which we now call Israel and began his ministry. This book is about both of those portions, what happened during that time as a child all the way up to his 30s and what happened during the years which became the core of the Bible and Christianity. Secondary title of this is Memories from the Life of Jesus. And a way to understand that is to look at the medium that is now in front of you. And through the technology that you're listening to me, it's amazing. You could talk to 1 million people, 2 million people, 5 million people. You can see through cameras and audio recording devices anywhere in the globe. You can get access to data, books, periodicals from all over the world. In a very real sense, the higher states, advanced states of consciousness are just like that, but more direct. And we're proving that. We're proving that that can be done. My last few episodes here, I was talking about the fact that we now have well over 100,000 children who are beginning to develop these advanced capabilities of consciousness, and very innocently. They can play a tablet game totally blindfolded. Literally, they can read a book that's opened in another part of the room when they're blindfolded. It's quite amazing. And it shows what the possibilities of consciousness are. You know, after all, this little world here is really a speck in the cosmic universe. And we are very young in the evolutionary cycle. Even your entire life is just a flicker of a moment in time. We've progressed in so many ways in our technology and our ability to stay alive in health and wellness, but in the understanding of the potentiality of the human soul and really our relationship to the universe, we're just beginning to really understand those states. Jesus was a christened one, which fundamentally means that at the time that he was baptized, a great, vast consciousness came in and joined with him, kind of like getting plugged into the internet on the cosmic scale. And so that allowed him to do many of the things he could do. Many, many healings happened. Many moments of grace were experienced in that short period of time to give individuals an idea of what is possible, but also fundamentally to help relieve the tremendous stress and sorrow that was going on in that part of the world at that time. And so one of the big confusions that they had, and they certainly do to this day, and that will be our topic today, is what is God? What is it that brings us into this world? What is this that takes us from this world? What is it that supports this huge, vast universe of billions of galaxies? And even that they know is not all that there is. There's a space on the other side of the bubble of the universe. So we're coming to a little bit more clarity about that. Back then, God was thought of as a king or a magistrate, somebody with great power. That isn't really the idea that Jesus was talking about. A lot of individuals speculated about what was going on in the universe, and one of them that became well known was the story of Dante's Inferno. And if you remember, or you see some of those pictures where people were tortured, if they were bad, and those that were good went up to some higher place, and that everything that you did in your life was being somehow recorded and judged. And at the end, you're going to pay the price. The concept that this is eternal damnation. God of the universe, he's not sitting on a chair somewhere in a cloud watching everything that's going on and recording everything. That awareness is everywhere at all times. This is the first thing that he said in his first ministry speech that he gave in the temple. And he went back again a couple of times, actually, and he continued to be rebuffed. And as time went on, different groups began to scheme on ways that they could stop that. They actually thought that he was going to cause a revolt or somehow was going to take over the church. He never had any intent to do anything like that. He was just trying to share what he has been through and trying to explain it as best he could in a language that people could understand. And honestly, in a lot of ways, that's exactly what I've been trying to do as well, to explain the deep experience and the profound awakening that I've been through, to let people know that these very high states are very attainable, and they are our next natural state of human evolution. And so these individuals that are starting to scheme in a way that they could take him down, could stop him from speaking and influencing the people, they'd already imprisoned John the Baptist, and around this time he was executed. It was terrible when that happened. Actually, what got Jesus into trouble was this idea of God and the fact that that divine Father was one with him. He would say very simply, the Father and I are one. If you want to see the Father and know the Father figure was the closest concept that they had of a munificent, wonderful, loving parent, if you will. And many of his analogies were about a good father caring for you, or like a shepherd taking care of the sheep quite lovingly. And if one is lost, he goes out of his way to find that sheep that was lost. So in a sense, he was trying to explain that divine being who had come into his life, and the great ones that he had met in India, he didn't really talk about them at all, even though the three wise men were sent from the masters in the East. He didn't want to complicate all of this, but those who were looking to find a way to trick him, and they tried in many ways, not paying his taxes or encouraging people to revolt. He was not telling individuals to fight against Rome, but he had a philosophy which was at odds with the understanding of the Jewish fathers. And so other individuals began to look for ways to trick him up. You know, we're used to thinking of God as something that's so vast, so far away. Now in the East, they had the concept for many, many ages that a being that was living these very high states, these enlightened, self-realized states, was one with God, and that the easiest and quickest ways was to take education training from such a being, ultimately to be around the divine love that passed through that being. It's kind of like they were saying, yes, the vast sky is the divine, but through this window you can see the divine. And so these enlightened beings, spiritual masters, were seen as windows to the divine. And if they were advanced enough, they didn't see themselves as a separate life. That is the core of what he was trying to share. The kingdom of heaven is within you. That divinity is around you, above you, below you, to the right, to the left, and is actually your very being, your existence. But when he began to say that the Father and I are one, that's what they used to trick him up, because it was, in their minds, blasphemy. The other things beginning to tell those that really follow him is that you need to do service. And service was a very, very important part of his teaching. This is what he was taught when he was in the East. He spent many years doing service, feeding people and caring for the sick and traveling here and there all around the country to learn about the different traditions that were in place. He honestly was very, very attracted, as I said in the early portion of this adventure novel, he's very attracted to Buddhism because they didn't get wound up in all the different offerings and all of that that had become commonplace in India. His teaching of Buddha, he learned to just be in that space and experience that divinity, and it will gradually grow through practice, through proper guidance, into an expansive, unbelievable state of oneness with the divine. Quite frankly, that's also what I'm trying to share in my own little ways with my earlier two novels, How to Live an Enlightened Life, and the time that I've spent with one of the greatest spiritual teachers of our age, Adventures with the First World Teacher. And so when he said, the Father and I are one, those that were seeking to find a way to silence him jumped on that, because that kind of, quote, blasphemy could result in death. And so they had basically decided they were going to use this as the means. So Jesus was stuck. He had a sense that he was going to go through some serious trials and tribulations, that there was going to be opposition. The Jewish population certainly wasn't happy with how they were a vassal state of Rome, but that's how Rome was expanding right now. It's funny that in the future, from Jesus' point of view, another 300 years, that the emperor of Rome adopts Christianity so that he can continue his expansion. It's kind of a funny end result, because what we know as Christianity really didn't formulate and the Bible wasn't put together for quite some time. Even the things about the life of Jesus weren't written down for 35, 40 years. So those records were used to empower the Roman Empire later. And so that's what happened, and that's why he was taken up and arrested. It wasn't necessarily the case that he needed to be crucified, although that was one of the more severe punishments. And the Romans were doing that all the time to individuals and groups that opposed him. They used fear to rule. And so many of these places that they conquered, they would crucify individuals along the way into those areas. Sometimes thousands of people were crucified, one after another, one after another, one after another. But it wasn't necessarily that he would be crucified. That came through a twist of fate where Pontius Pilate didn't want to take responsibility. And he turned it over to the other individuals that were there witnessing the case, saying, you decide. I wash my hands of it. He thought he could escape, but he didn't. Now, the thought was, if he really is one with God, that great power would come in and save him. Isn't that strange? They took his argument and said, if this is true, then somehow God is going to break in and free you. That's not how things work. He went through a very, very difficult time around the crucifixion. Now, the question is, did he suffer through all of that? He did and he didn't. Both things are true. This body, if something happens to it, we feel pain, for sure. If we are beaten, we will feel that. But the question is, does that really diminish in any way the being that is within us, the divine existence within it? It does not. That is never lessened. That is never brought down at all in any individual, ever, because we are one with that divine existence, which always was and always is. That was what he was trying to communicate. So those of you who have been in the healthcare field, like myself, and have been around hospitals from time to time, have noticed some really interesting things. You take an individual that has an automobile accident. A lot of times the individuals have those very severe, they don't remember. It's like the circuit breakers go off in a house when the electricity gets too high and shuts everything down. We do have a safety circuit within us, which really takes us out. And if something really traumatic happens to the body, actually we are gone. Many individuals that have had life-threatening experiences who, quote, died on the operating table, there's lots of experiences where they're still around and they're watching and they're seeing everything that's going on. So we are actually protected. So although a lot may have happened to his body, he survived. There was never any question that he wasn't going to survive. The divine existence which he had merged with protected him all along the way, at every step along the way. Now, everybody has argued that he died on the cross. You can say that if that makes you feel good. If that supports your point of view, that's fine. People die on the operating table every single day, thousands of times, really, around the globe, and they are brought back. Their heart stops. They can be brought back. There's many examples of individuals falling into a frozen lake, for example, but they are brought back out of that. We'll talk about what happened during the crucifixion separately. That's a whole separate topic. But that trial, it was essentially destiny that he was going to be convicted. He was ready to take on whatever he needed to go through. And I can only share from my own experience, when I began to pass into that same unbelievably joyful, blissful state, I became grateful for every single thing that I passed through. All the good, the bad, I shared it, not hiding anything. And so Jesus also felt blessed no matter what he needed to go through. I know in my case, I would think if it would have been necessary for me to lose an arm or a leg or something else like that in order to be able to come to this place that I am now living in, I was willing to do that. Because really, this body is not you. It's what we travel in for a certain period of time, just like an automobile. And it breaks down and it's going to fail. What's important is that in our life, like in Jesus' life, that we rise to the direct understanding and experience through proper guidance and education of that state to some degree in this life. Number one, that's one of the major reasons we're here. And secondly, is to contribute, to be of service to this world. And going through the difficulties, we develop these divine qualities. How much love is there in the universe beyond anything anybody could ever imagine? How much compassion? The great adventure of this life is beyond the best superhero movie you could possibly ever imagine, but it is real in the sense that obviously it is happening to all of us. And it's not real in the sense that anything truly happens that could diminish or destroy our very being. Because one of the big secrets that Jesus was pointing to is that there's one life in this universe. There's actually only one soul. We are like waves on the ocean, but we are also part of that ocean. And if one is able to go to the core of that ocean, to the depth of it, and experience the vastness beneath the surface of our mind, intellect, ego, memory, and really live in that space where we get to the door of the divinity. We basically move to the space where we're totally nothing, zero, but right at that edge of zero, of nobodiness, then the everybodyness, the vast reality that is the basis of this universe, comes into our awareness. Jesus was already living in that vast space and had the advantage also of many of these tremendous abilities, capabilities. You would call them psychic or supernormal, but they're actually normal. It's normal in the sense that that is where we're moving towards. That is what we are moving towards. And realize, as Jesus said, if you gain everything and you lose your soul, what do you have? You have nothing. You can never be fulfilled by anything that is going to be happening outside, any attainment. And it's great. It's okay. Have what you want to have. But if you think that that's going to bring you happiness, one of the last episodes, I talked about the life of Judas and how he betrayed his spiritual master and how quickly the results of that action came back upon him. He didn't last much longer. He didn't go to eternal hell and damnation. There is no such state, or if there is, it's in your mind. So those people that are psychotic, that are imagining great, terrible, awful things, where is that happening? It's happening in their mind, in their awareness. So that's truly the hell. Yes, there are lower realms to this universe. Yeah, they're higher, they're lower. All of that is true. And I talk about those in my novels, what they are. But it's not like Dante's Inferno. You're going to get judged and you're going to get sit down and you stay there forever. That is not the case at all. If you've had a bad time, If you've had a difficult life, you need some rest time. Time is not the same in all the areas of this universe. We know that because of physics. If you're right next to a black hole, you could be there for a few minutes and years could pass out here. So time is not the same. This great world is here for our adventure, for our joy of giving, and the joy of growing into those great qualities. See, our greatest wealth is not what we have in our pockets. It's not what we have in our mind, no matter how creative you may think. The greatest wealth is not even in our actions. So if you did every great action imaginable and you saved the lives of, let's say, 1 million people, it isn't like college. You graduate and you've done all that good work and somehow they give you the diploma of being a divine being. It's not like that. You can't earn it. What can you do possibly that is equal to limitless joy, love, compassion, all these divine qualities that are within us? There's nothing that measures up to that. That was my conclusion. So ultimately, it's a gift of grace. And so Jesus, the christened one, was here to bring some of that grace into the world. And he was happy and ready and willing to sacrifice himself. He did, but the story is that he lived through it. You can say he went to heaven. He was going to heaven all the time. He was going to heaven when he closed his eyes and prayed. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the simple techniques that he taught to some of his closest disciples then in our next episode. So tell your friends, send them back, and have them take a look. And my earlier works that I wrote are really designed to be a foundation. So if people listen to this openly and directly, they can realize, well, that's quite a backstory, the preparation that I've been through for over 50 years to be able to tell this. So join me then, and we'll talk more about this. This is Dr. James Weldon Yogati speaking from Heavenly Mountain in Boone, North Carolina, about the greatest true spiritual adventure story ever lived. Bye-bye.